Hello and welcome to this series of lessons or lectures which are going to deal with labor laws in Kenya. First of all, let me start by restating that I am Dr. John Chekenya, PhD, CHRPK. I'm a seasoned HR practitioner, a researcher, and an accomplished scholar in HR. The purpose of this lesson is to help us understand more on the legal framework in the Kenyan laws. Allow me therefore to start by giving a brief definition of what labor laws are. Labor laws are just a system of laws that seek to regulate the relationship between employers or a group of employers and their employees. The labor relationship in Kenya, as you look at it, you can actually say that the labor laws in Kenya are well structured. The legal framework in Kenya is a well structured law on labor. And this labor framework is heavily influenced by the International Labour Organization standards and guidelines. The purpose of the labor legal framework. The labor legislation has the following purposes. It was established for the following purposes. The first purpose was to establish a legal system that facilitates productive individual and collective employment relationship. Number two, the labor legislation was also established to serve as a vehicle for achieving harmonious industrial relations based on workplace democracy. Thirdly, the labor regulation framework was also established to provide a clear and constant reminder and guarantee of fundamental principles and the rights to work. So, having gone through the purposes of the labor framework, I'll pose the question: can you state the purposes of the labor regulatory framework in Kenya? Can you give the purpose of the labor regulatory framework in Kenya? You have said there are three main key purposes, reasons why these laws were put in place. Then let us move slightly to look at another thing, still on the framework introduction. And I want to say that the labor framework is built on the bedrock of social duty of an employer. That in employment relationship, an employer has a social duty to perform. The labor framework also recognizes that workers are in a weak bargaining position and hence they need to be protected. So the social responsibility or duty of an employer is to protect the worker. The employee is at a disadvantage, and therefore this employee need to be protected. Allow me now to look at the sources of labor laws in Kenya. And labor laws in Kenya are derived from a number of sources. One of the sources is the Constitution. The Constitution is the paramount law of the country. It is the basis of all the laws which are enacted in the country. Another source is the Acts of Parliament. Acts of Parliament. The Constitution directs Parliament to enact specific legislations to give meaning to some section of that Constitution. And therefore, Acts of Parliament are other sources of labor laws. We have subsidiary legislation. Subsidiary legislation is an additional law that keeps on rising as a result of new changes in the social welfare, the development of the country. International law conventions are other sources of labor laws, in addition to the judicial precedents. The judiciary keeps on coming up with the laws. It keeps on producing keynote points of law that are then used as precedents in when we are coming up with the labor regulations. Then we have the common law as another source of labor regulations. The common law is the law that has not been written down. These are law that applies maybe from the traditions, maybe from the culture of the people. This law also forms the basis of the labor regulatory framework in Kenya. So what does the Constitution say about labor relations? So we look at these sources bit by bit until we clear in the next section. Be prepared. What we have done now is to look at the sources of labor laws. We have looked at the purpose of labor laws, and we have defined what labor laws are. Therefore, the next session we'll be looking at the source, these sources, and see what they actually say on the